So while we're all waiting for season 3 of Kengan Ashura, which still has no confirmed release date or any official news that it's even being made, I wanted to recommend some anime Kengan fans would most likely enjoy, with the emphasis being on anime as I've done a manga version of this in the past. The sad thing is, no other anime really exists that's very similar to Kengan, so I'm going for shows that give off a similar vibe, themes and overall appeal, but still it's much more limited compared to the manga pool. If you're new to the channel and haven't already, make sure to subscribe, check out all the other stuff in the description like the Discord, and yep, let's go. So the most expected answer and most popular answer for this question is telling people to watch Bucky, and that's what I'm going to do here. So Bucky is more bizarre than Kengan, has more outlandish elements, but it still has the same or similar martial art base than what Kengan does, and I'd say it's closer to the appeal of Kengan in the first series of Bucky, the older one that looks like this, compared to the current Netflix adaptations, which are adapting stuff from later in the Bucky manga and kinda just move quite a bit past the realistic grounded martial art elements into more insanity, especially in the new season that's coming up. But the early and first anime of Bucky, regardless of how, dated it looks to today's standard, it's still pretty solid and does give off a very hype feeling to it, similar to what the Kengan Annihilation tournament does, especially the Maximum tournament, which was the final arc of this anime, with it having similar aspects like being a martial art tournament, having new characters introduced, learning about the characters' backstories and cool stuff like that. And of course, considering that it's Bucky, there is some crazy insanity that happens throughout the tournament as well, which you wouldn't really expect from something like Kengan, but I do think if you watch Bucky, you will get a similar vibe to Kengan in some way, but it's more on like a street fighting level later on and in the earlier parts compared to this single tournament. Even later tournaments known as the Rotai tournament don't really give off a similar vibe to the Maximum tournament, but as a whole, if you like martial art anime with a little, craziness added on top, that's Bucky for you. Next, I'm going to talk about some boxing anime, starting with the anime known as Levious. So this show is also on Netflix alongside Kengan Ashura and has 12 episodes for season 1, and I do believe season 2 is currently in the works, so you can expect that as well. Also similar to Kengan, it's an anime done in full CGI, which may be a turn off for some. Me personally, I've seen that many full CGI anime at this point, it doesn't really bother me, and if you liked Kengan, you'll most likely won't mind the CGI used in Levious. But the difference is it's a mecha boxing anime, not in the sense that they're, wielding big giant robots. It's that they have robotic arms, or in the main character's case, a single arm which is robotic. And of course, the fighting element in this series is the boxing. There are some street fight elements throughout, but the main thing, like 99% of the story, is boxing, with it really having a focus on fights throughout. Similar to the Kengan anime, which is mostly fight, it does have some other story elements, but compared to the manga version, Kengan's anime is truly just focused on the fights, and I can say the same for Levius. It doesn't have the same amount of fights, but the ones you do get are pretty hype, and apart from fights, we get training for characters and actually some pretty decent emotional moments. If you're a fan of boxing, I think Levius will also be a great watch, so if your favorite character in Kengan is Gaolang, Levius will be pretty hyped to see as well. Just be aware of the steampunk, mecha boxing element throughout, but if you can get past that, I think Kengan fans would most likely enjoy Levius. Then we have the other boxing anime like Megalo Box and Hajime no Ippo. These two are a lot more popular than Levius. Most people probably are aware of them, but I'll just cover them quickly. So Megalo Box is somewhat similar to Levius in the steampunk mechanical boxing element, with it being more gritty and I could say darker than Levius in some ways. That's a major appealing aspect of Megalo Box, and as a whole it's truly an underdog story. And season 2 is currently airing right now. I haven't started watching season 2, but I heard good things from season 2 of Megalo Box, so a story that gets better and better as it goes. Who doesn't want to watch that? And of course the hype boxing throughout. And then Hajime no Ippo, which is probably the most grounded and realistic out of these two boxing anime, with it not having any, steampunk mecha elements. It's just straight raw boxing. It's a lot longer than, Levius and Megalo Box, and I personally haven't seen all of it. I've only watched like I'll say like 60%, but I have watched most of the fights on YouTube. I don't really care too much about the individual characters throughout, which is a pretty unique opinion of mine, as everyone I've talked to have seen Hajime no Ippo love the characters throughout, but the main appealing aspect for me is the hype fights throughout, which are, you know, a common occurrence throughout, and if you're a Kengan fan, Hajime no Ippo fights will definitely be appealing to you. And of course there's tons of other, you know, boxing anime, some a lot older like Joe and other ones, but there's a ton of boxing anime, and if you want to get a similar vibe to Kengan, boxing anime is your best bet, especially if you're considering the hype aspects of these anime compared to the hype aspects of Kengan. The next anime I'm going to talk about goes by the name Konichi, the Mightiest Disciple, an anime I recently finished a few months ago. It's similar to Kengan in the martial art element, and I would say the martial art elements are even more demonstrated throughout Konichi, especially the training elements where we don't really get to see characters train in Kengan Ashura's anime. While in Konichi, the majority of the anime is the main character training in various martial art disciplines, which is pretty entertaining. However, take note that comedy is a major aspect of Konichi, and sometimes the comedy can turn you off. Me personally, it took me quite a while to finish the series, which has like around 50 episodes if I remember correctly, and it took me like months to finish it due to this comedy alone. I don't watch too many comedy based anime, and Konichi, with it very well being a martial art anime, you know, throughout, it does have a lot of comedy elements in like almost every episode, and I would even be willing to say, in the anime at least, there's more comedy than actually raw fighting. But when we do get the fights throughout Konichi, they are pretty hype, which is why I'm adding it on today's list. But I'll probably put this at the bottom of the list, and I would prefer you to watch the previously mentioned anime. And to end the video, I'll have an honorable mention, which is OG Dragon Ball, in particular the early World Martial Art tournaments. There is a lot of stuff in OG Dragon Ball which is like about the adventure and exploring the world of Dragon Ball, but when you get the, you know, World Martial Art tournaments, that's the major hype and most appealing parts about Dragon Ball to me personally. And why I say the earlier ones is because how more martial art based it is compared to later on, with, you know, the introduction of various blast attacks becoming the main aspect of Dragon Ball. They are prevalent somewhat in early Dragon Ball during the tournaments, but not as much in the later parts. And I do think if you haven't seen OG Dragon Ball somehow, the World Martial Art Tournament would be your best bet if you're looking for something that's kind of like Kengan, but as I mentioned, this is a honorable mention. And those are the anime I recommend you to watch if you are waiting for Kengan Ashura Season 3, if you haven't seen any of them. If you also want to recommend some other anime I didn't mention in today's video down in the comments, make sure to do so. And as always, shout out to the people who support the channel via the Patreon, absolute mad lads. If you want to join the Patreon, make sure to check out the stuff in the description. But yep, that's it guys, peace.